Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of working group established at the council to look at odour problems and particularly the area with Walley's Quarry in it. What we have this evening is councillors on that working group. So we have Councillor Reddish, Councillor Jones with us, myself, Councillor Fear. I'm hoping that we will be joined by Councillor Jill Heesum soon, and Councillor Amelia Rout has given her apologies this evening. What we intend to do this evening is, because from time to time various authorities are involved with these sorts of problems, that we were going to have a presentation from our own environmental health section here at the Borough Council to tell us what they can and, as importantly, what they cannot do in these matters. So we've got with us here Nesta Barker, who's the head of environmental health, and Darren Walters, who's a team leader from environmental health. And I think I'm right in saying it's Darren who's going to give the presentation. So I'm going to hand over to him at this point.
Okay, thank you. I'm Darren, by the way. Okay, right, just to share my screen. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right then. So my name is Darren Walters. I'm the Environmental Protection Team Manager at Newcastle Borough Council Environmental Health. Good evening, committee. Good evening, members of the public watching this. Okay, as Councillor Fear says, I'm also assisted tonight by Nesta Barker, who's the head of environmental health at Newcastle Borough Council. Please stop me if I'm going too fast, or if you want clarification of anything as I go through it. More than happy to take questions at the end if that helps. Okay. Just trying to work this from the beginning. Okay, so there's 5 areas I want to touch on tonight. So the environmental health role, give a broad outline of what we do in relation to the landfill, the principal legislation under the Environmental Protection Act 1990, how we investigate complaints, complaints data, and then air quality standards, which I know has given some concern for the some of the community groups that have presented at the first stage. Okay. So in terms of the environmental health role, we've got quite a broad duty, or a broad role in terms of the landfill. We are a consultee to the County Council, who are the principal waste planning authority for the landfill, and we consult them on matters relating to the landfill, so such as noise, odour, anything that falls under the planning regime, basically. Also a consultee to the Environment Agency on the environmental permit applications, and we've had involvement right from the outset up until the recent variation application. In our role as environmental health, we're also consultee to the Borough Council's planning authority, as the planning authority for the area, for developments surrounding the landfill, such as housing estates and industrial areas, that sort of thing. We also have regular liaison with Public Health England on a number of health matters, and obviously this site has given rise to concern about impacts on health for the community, and we've sought advice from them, and you'll see their advice later on. We sit on the Landfill Liaison Committee, and that meets quarterly. Since the landfill was set up, both under the previous operators and the current operators, we've sat on that committee as an environmental health representative, along with representatives of the Borough Council, County Council, Environment Agency and the site operators. We liaise with key stakeholders, so that's those are principally the regulators and Public Health England. We've obviously got an investigatory role in terms of statutory nuisances, which I'll go through, and then also we've got a local air quality management function in terms of review and assessment of air quality locally. So going into those in a bit further detail, in terms of our role as a consultee to the County Council as the Waste Planning Authority, as I say, that role there extends purely to planning legislation and planning matters, it doesn't cover the permit side, so the two are very, very distinct. In 1996, there was an application by the then landfill operator to use the site for a landfill, as the site was coming towards the end of its life as a quarry. We objected to that application given its location, obviously on the edge of the town centre and also in very close proximity to the residential area. That planning permission was subsequently refused by the County Council, and that was appealed to the Secretary of State, with the Secretary of State granting planning permission for the landfill site on appeal. In 2013, there was a renewal of mineral planning permission application to the County Council. As this was a former quarry, any quarry or mineral site is required to periodically update the planning conditions, and that's commonly known as a ROMP application. So that keeps planning conditions current. We took that opportunity to request a number of updated planning conditions, particularly in recognition of the Persimmons development just over the site boundary off Keel Road, and we requested modernisation of noise conditions there. It wasn't possible to revoke any permission at that stage. All the County Council could do was review any comments received in light of planning legislation and then update the permission accordingly to keep it current and in line with current legal requirements. Moving on, we're also a consultee to the Environment Agency on environmental permit applications. Again, back in around about late 90s, there was a permit application to the Environment Agency. And again, we sought to object to that on community impact grounds, obviously given its location. That permit application was granted by the Secretary of State again. So Secretary of State's granted the planning permission, has also granted the permits application. And the Borough Council's objected as far as it could to both applications. Last year, here we had a permit variation application to increase the waste tonnage from what was then allowed at 250,000 tonnes per annum to 400,000 tonnes per annum. We reviewed the documents there and made a number of objections on technical grounds, including odour impact. That prompted significant review of documentation and request for information from the applicant by the Environment Agency, and that updated information was reviewed early this year, sorry. And again, we've provided comments on that to the Environment Agency. That saw the Borough Council Environmental Health Division review the permits documentation and prepare an objection to the application, which was signed off by the Chief Executive under delegated powers. We did make a number of representations on that objection via the Chief Executive, and obviously we've sought assurances that from the Environment Agency that in them making the decision to ultimately grant the permit, that we would see no worsening of the existing situation for the surrounding community. There's some argument that potentially the increase in waste tonnages could bring forward the closure of the site, and in the short term hopefully improve the situation for the surrounding community by bringing forward the closure of the site, as we say. In terms of off-site matters, we are also a consultee to the Borough Council in its role as the local planning authority. This is principally to do with housing development around the site, but also industrial development as well that takes place off the site. The most recent of those being the Persimmons estate on Keel Road, and latterly the Hamptons Field Keel Road developments, which is on the site of the scrapyard, or the former scrapyard, and the field that comes up to the Keel Road roundabout. We sought consultancy advice at that stage in relation to the odour impacts. Obviously, at that stage, we were aware of odour concerns, and we were receiving complaints to the Borough Council about odour. We felt that we had reasonable grounds to object on odour grounds, and we provided evidence via our consultants to the Planning Committee. Planning Committee at the Borough Council took that as one of the grounds for refusing permission, and a decision notice was issued by the Borough Council refusing planning permission. And again, that was subsequently appealed to the Planning Inspectorate, who heard expert evidence from our own consultant on the odour impact, also heard expert evidence from the developer at the time, and subsequently issued a decision notice basically saying that the odour was adequately controlled via the Environment Agency permit, so that wasn't a sustained grounds for refusal. And ultimately the planning inspector granted planning permission for the Keel Road development. There are a number of conditions on that permission that relate to the landfill impact, principally to do with noise impact. So we've managed to secure noise mitigation on the Hamptons Field site to protect residential immunity from noise impacts associated with the landfill, and various infrastructure on there, such as the gas compound that's used to generate electricity from surplus landfill gas. Okay, again, moving on, we've had a significant discussions with Public Health England as the acknowledged experts on health matters. And late last year, they were aware of the report produced by the Environment Agency, which looked into monitoring of the site and emissions from the site. We sought advice from them about health trend data locally, and they subsequently went away and reviewed that and didn't identify any increase in GP consultations or calls to the NHS 111 service. And as you'll see there, from what they're saying is from analysis of health syndromic surveillance data for the period up to December 2019, PHE has no evidence of an increase in GP consultations or calls to NHS 111 by the neighbouring population for symptoms of breathing difficulties or eye problems, and similarly for GP and hours consultations for asthma and wheeze. So from that, what we can see is that the PHE are basically telling us there's been no increase in health health reports to local NHS or GPs attributed to the landfill site, and certainly nothing out of the norm there that would prompt them into monitoring issues. Obviously, what they are saying there is that would encourage anybody who has got concerns to report them to the GP if they are feeling that they are affected by health, breathing difficulties, asthma, and the like, and that will be taken on board. They're also saying that obviously in terms of odours, that human nose is very sensitive to odours there, and we can detect many odours which are present at levels which are very well below levels which are likely to cause problems for health. So they're not saying there that people can't smell them. They're acknowledging people can suffer from nausea, headaches, dizziness as a reaction to odours, even when the substances that cause those smells are themselves not harmful to health. And the final takeaway there from PHE, based on research that they've undertaken, is that living close to a well-managed landfill site does not pose significant risk to human health. And that's based on landfill sites that are regulated to modern environmental standards under the Landfill Directive, which is what this site is regulated to. Again, moving on and just expanding on some further aspects of our role. We are members of the Liaison Committee, and we say we've attended those meetings quarterly. We report on issues that we've identified, complaint data, anything of concern that's been reported to the Borough Council, and discuss that with the parties around the table, such as the Environment Agency, County Council as the Planning Authority, who send representation there, and also obviously the operator itself. We are able to take questions and come away with actions from that committee. All the minutes are available for that committee on the Red Industries landfill pages there, and you've got the link there. Again, in our day-to-day role, we'll have numerous discussions with agencies and key stakeholders, such as the Environment Agency, as principal regulator. I have monthly meetings with them to just catch up on how things are developing on site, discuss complaint data and things like that, and anything significant that's coming up in terms of how the site is operating. Staff to County Council for any planning matters or alleged planning breaches. Obviously the site operator Red, and I have attended a couple of community groups in the locality, particularly early last year when there was significant community interest in what was happening at the site. And as part of our day-to-day role, we'll also meet with residents and businesses on almost on a daily basis if we're responding to complaints and out about in the community. Obviously, when we're out and about in the community, we do identify issues. We're only human at the end of the day. So there are some issues that will fall outside of the Borough Council's remit. We are representatives of the community, and so we will report matters to appropriate regulators, so such as mud and debris on the road, which is a matter really for the Environment Agency and the County Council. Odours where they're not affecting homes or businesses, which is principally an EA matter. Goals, which is again an Environment Agency matter. Dust and the quality of cover, and also litter and things falling from vehicles. Again, those will go back to the principal regulators and also to Red Industries for appropriate action and investigation. Okay, so moving on, in relation to our legal role, we have a duty as a Borough Council under the Environmental Protection Act 1990. This is our principal legislation to investigate complaints about statutory nuisances, and we've got examples listed there on the left-hand side. So noise and vibration, if that were to be a problem, dust, light, odour, insects, fumes and gases. Okay, in terms of the Environmental Protection Act, it does place a duty on the Borough Council to receive complaints and undertake an investigation into those complaints. So it's not something that we have got discretion in. We have a duty to undertake that investigation, and that is enshrined in law. What we are concerned about is the impacts of any of those statutory nuisances on the use and enjoyment of property, so homes and workplaces. That's where the legislation is focused, and we can't concern ourselves with issues that are encountered by people driving by the site, or when they're out and about in the public areas, walking the dog, for example, or in leisure areas or the cemetery. That's a matter that we can't be involved in through this particular act. If we identify a statutory nuisance, we must serve an abatement notice where it's identified or considered likely. That is very clearly defined in law. There's no getting out of that duty if we identify a statutory nuisance, and that's very clearly identified in law. And any abatement notice can require the abatement, prohibition, restriction, or it can specify works to reduce the impact of nuisance. As with any notice, it can be appealed, and we've got there an example of the typical grounds for appeal for a commercial type of operation. So that it's not a nuisance, there's some problem with the notice, there's an error, we've been unreasonable, or that the best practical means, which is highlighted in dark blue there, is being used to counteract the nuisance. And essentially, the best practical means is a legal definition which mirrors the requirement of the permit to be operating towards best available techniques. So applying it the best standards possible that are reasonable, determined reasonable in law and UK legislation to operate the site. So we have although it's slightly differently worded in the Environmental Protection Act, it does drive at the same thing as the Environment Agency permit. On any appeal against the notice, the Magistrates Court can cancel, quash or vary the notice, and it's ultimately a decision of the court and obviously a legal argument at the end of the day. I want to make it very clear at this moment in time that we've not established a statutory nuisance, but were we to do so, again, we very clearly we have a legal duty to undertake action there. What we can't do, and I believe what there's some expectation that the council should do, is require closure of the site. That isn't something that is within the scope of the legislation, and indeed there's case law that basically says that as well. So were we in a position to serve an abatement notice, and were we in a position to enforce that, we could only require up to a certain standard and up to what is best practical means. So that basically means that there could always be an issue of some concern, but as long as the site is operating and doing everything reasonable that it can do, then that's all that can be expected for an industrial operation. And that goes with any sort of business activity or industrial activity that they have this best practical means defence. Okay, so again, moving on, and this is extract from the Environmental Protection Act, so it just covers a bit more in depth about what best practical means is. It's to have regard to local conditions and circumstances, so where the site is located, what's around it, to the current state of technical knowledge, which is basically drawing on expertise and guidance documents from the Environment Agency as the acknowledged regulator, and then to the financial implications of anything that we may require. Again, the EA have significant technical guidance that for the operation of landfill, so that would be the default position for determining what's best practical means for an operation were we to take action under the Environmental Protection Act. And the means is to be employed includes the design, installation, maintenance and manner and periods of operation of plant and machinery, and the design, construction and maintenance of buildings and structures and the infrastructure that's on site there. So all things that really the Environment Agency permit is driving at as well. So you can see there's an element of duplication were we to go down this route. If we are to consider what best practical means is, it can only go as far as any duty imposed by law, and it also can't compromise any safe working conditions. If there are always going to be instances in any industrial operation or business operation where there's unforeseeable circumstances, and you for example, you may get an odour release because of failure of some infrastructure. So long as they're shown that they're maintaining that infrastructure, that wouldn't be considered to be a breach of best practical means. And again, the Environment Agency permit requires maintenance of the infrastructure and monitoring of emissions from the site. In theory, if we were to serve notice and that notice was upheld on appeal or wasn't appealed and remained enforceable, any breach of that notice then would become an enforcement matter for the Borough Council. Because the site is regulated via a permit, we would need Secretary of State approval for any prosecution that the Borough Council might wish to take. And obviously that is going to be quite a high threshold to cross. The Secretary of State is the same Secretary of State that's also the regulator of the permits, ultimately through the Environment Agency. So you can see he's got the decision to that we have to seek authority from him to take any enforcement action for anything that's covered by the Environment Agency permits. For matters that aren't covered by the permit, we are free to act, but in the main, odours and the various issues that people are reporting to us and the Environment Agency and the councillors are covered by the permit. So again, we would require authority from them to take any action through the courts. In terms of what best practical means is, it's ultimately a decision of the courts. It's obviously a legal argument and a technical argument, and the court has to weigh that up. We don't determine that. Obviously, we have a regard to it, but ultimately it's a court decision. It wouldn't affect anything were we to identify a nuisance. We would have to serve notice. We would have to obviously word that notice appropriately and take appropriate technical advice in the wording and requirements of any notice. And ultimately then it would be a decision for the recipient whether to appeal that notice. And again, we'd go through a technical argument in court as to why the notice was required or why the notice wasn't required on appeal. Okay. Okay, so moving on to the investigation of complaints. Excuse me, sorry. So moving on to the investigation of complaints, we as a Borough Council are moving towards digital channels like most agencies, and we are able to receive complaints 24/7, 365 via the council's website. On the Borough Council's homepage there's a dedicated link to report Walley's Quarry concerns, and that invites people to then report on an online form what their matters are, what's given them cause for concern. They can report anything that relates to landfill, odours, noise, galls, mud, dust, anything at all. And where appropriate, we'll share that information with obviously the officers at the time in the office, which will get a response immediately if it's reported as happening right now. And also to the Environment Agency and also to the site operator. What we don't do is share any personal information. So, for example, what they will get is a date and time of a complaint. This is the Environment Agency and also the site operator. So they'll get a date and time of the complaint coming in. They'll also get a postcode and a description of what the report is saying. All personal information is stripped out, so it's entirely anonymous. The site is required through its permit to investigate any complaints made to it. So whether that be from ourselves, directly from members of the public to the site, via the Environment Agency, to keep a log of those complaints and then to provide an investigation report, and that's a requirement of the permit. We also receive any investigation findings back from the site as well. Okay. And as it stands at the moment, we are resourced to respond to complaints during the working day. So that's between 9 AM and 5 PM, Monday to Friday. We are looking to provide a response to complaints out of hours to coincide with the changing weather conditions. So that's typically when we've noticed a spike in complaints based on previous year's experience. So calm, frosty, cold mornings typically, and say we'll provide a limited resource to be on call for a period of time to go out to those complaints. Okay, so we've got quite clear protocols and guidance which assist us with the investigation of nuisances. And in relation to odour complaints of this nature, principal cause of complaint for the landfill is that we've got guidance here. So we've got the DEFRA odour guidance for local authorities. So although that's been withdrawn, it's still publicly available, and it does provide useful guidance to local authorities on how to go about investigating odour complaints for statutory nuisance purposes. We've also got guidance here on how the statutory nuisance regime interacts with the environmental permitting regime. So the statutory nuisance regime is the local authority function. The environmental permitting regime is the Environment Agency function, and the two interact together. And this is where we get the requirement for the Secretary of State approval for to initiate prosecution proceedings. We also have regard to guidance that's issued by the Environment Agency. This H4 odour management guidance that gives guidance to operators and also to regulators on management of odours and permitting requirements for permitted activities such as the landfill, and that helps with our assessment of nuisances as well. And then here we've got guidance on odour assessment for planning, which is something we used in relation to the Hamptons planning application, and also this latter page here that gives general guidance on how councils deal with complaints. So that's from the government, and it gives basic high level details to members of the public on how councils generally approach odour complaints. So these links are available to review. If members of the committee have got any questions, once they've reviewed these documents, if they so wish, I'm more than happy to provide a response to those following this presentation and at some point in the future. And obviously anything we do provide to you will be in writing, so there'll be a clear, that'll form part of the evidence base for the committee. Okay, so the actual investigation complaints then. So officers will visit people in the home or workplace if the complaint is reporting as happening now, and we are in work, so we'll aim to provide a response to those complaints in fairly swift time. We do acknowledge the concern that this is causing, and we've given a commitment as far as possible to prioritise response to these complaints, given the amount of community feeling. Obviously, we can't guarantee a response in every case. We do have other things to do, but we certainly have officers who have been out and will go out in the future to investigate nuisances and gather evidence. As we say there, we are also looking to provide a response to out of hours complaints, so things that are happening early evening, during the night. And we'll be putting that resource in place possibly before the end of the year. So we're just keeping an eye on the weather at the moment and looking to time that appropriately. So we've got officers on standby to go out of hours to people's homes. It'll be a case of 2 officers going out, 2 officers independently rating and assessing the nuisance themselves, noting down in notebooks, paste notebooks for evidence purposes, what they're finding, and then rating the odour according to what we call these 5 feed-all factors. So we look at the frequency of the odour, the intensity, which is this 0 to 6 scale, which people are asked to rate the odour on when they're reporting it to the Environment Agency, to the Borough Council. I believe also the committee are aware of this 0 to 6 scale. So 0 being no odour detected, 6 being absolutely awful, and yeah, you wouldn't want to be there if it was a 6. Duration, so how long the odour is lasting. So we can experience odours from a very short transient odour through to prolonged. The offensiveness of the odour, in the main, landfill odours will be characterised as unpleasant, hydrogen sulfide smell, the waste smells, and then the location, which is the type of receptor. And obviously in our case, residential areas are some of the most sensitive receptors that we've got. Workplaces are less sensitive, obviously given the nature, but residential areas are the most sensitive locations. So in the main, that tends to be where we get most of the complaints from. So when we go out, we'll go into people's homes, into people's gardens, assess the complaints. They'll very often be there. We'll enter into discussion with them, listen to what they've got to say. We'll answer any questions, acknowledge any concerns, and hopefully appear and actually be transparent in our assessments. We've got absolutely nothing to hide. Everything that we note down is available, is disclosable under freedom of information legislation. So again, nothing to hide at all. Any enforcement action that we undertake is evidence-based, so that's not just in relation to odour complaints, that's in relation to all enforcement action that environmental health takes. And in relation to statutory nuisances, any abatement notice must meet all the necessary legal tests. So a number of legal tests that we're required to apply based on case law and court decisions from the past. And that case law is indeed evolving as time goes on as well. So we have to keep ourselves current and abreast of any changes in court decisions and how that affects our role as regulators. We don't use instrumentation. I know there's been a lot of discussion from the public and members of the Scrutiny Committee about instrumentation and why we're not using it. And there are various reasons for that. You'll see, if you go back to the guidance I referred to earlier, particularly the Environment Agency's H4 guidance, that'll give a very good reasoned argument as to why instrumentation isn't used typically for the assessment of odours. As we've said there, odour contains many chemical components, and the human nose is very, very sensitive to a wide range of chemical components, particularly sulphurous compounds. The portable devices that people think we can use are typically dedicated to one particular chemical, and they're reading at such a high level that we wouldn't be approaching anywhere near the sensitivity of the human nose. So, and ultimately, at the end of the day, we are interested in what people are experiencing, hence why we go out and do our own tests. And
Darren, could I just ask you, there are two abbreviations there, which I'm not that familiar with, yep. PPM and PPB. Could you just take us through what they in fact mean?
Sure, yeah. So the portable devices that people see on the internet and that people are querying while we're not using them, those are typically a device that's used by somebody at work, and those are measuring substances at parts per million. So at a very high level, if you like, whereas the human nose, so that's the ppm, is parts per million, whereas the human nose is a lot more sensitive than any of these chemical portable device detectors. And we're detecting odours at parts per billion, so very, very small amounts. And that's, to get instrumentation that's able to do that, you're talking something that's going to be in this, that's going to be typically sited in a big cabin. So it isn't anything that's exactly portable. It's something that would be dedicated to a purpose, and typically what the environment agency used for their monitoring exercise, which involved a big trailer on the garden centre site. So does that answer your question? Is that clear?
Yes, it is. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so the takeaway from that really is that our nose is a lot more sensitive than the instrumentation that's used in the workplace measurements, and is commonly available that can be found on the internet at not a lot of money. It is that type of instrumentation is really concerned with safety. So you are looking at levels well above anything that's going to cause anybody any harm. Okay. So just moving on, in terms of our investigations, we've adopted this pro forma. It's not showing too clearly. It looks a bit fuzzy on my screen, but hopefully you can see that. So I've adapted this from the guidance documents that we referred to earlier, and also from discussions with other colleagues around in other local authorities. This is dedicated for odour investigations, so date, time, how long we've been on site for, who the officer is, case references, where we've gone to, which is the address. We'll also look at weather data, Met data, so we'll get that from the Met office. We'll also make a note of weather conditions at the time, because obviously that has a big impact on how odour can manifest itself. So dry, rain, fog, snow. Also the wind strength, no wind, light, steady, strong, and also where the wind direction is coming from. Obviously, we do get reports of odours in the area which aren't directly attributable to the landfill site, typically farm odours and that sort of thing. So it's very important that we know where the wind's coming from to be able to try and pinpoint a source. And then also the temperature plays a very big and important part in odours and how they manifest themselves where people live. The odour address, so where people are attributing the odour to, such as the landfill site. The description of the odour is reported by the complainant and also the officer, which is the odour description there. Whether it's constant or intermittent, so we get transient odours and we get prolonged odours that can last for several minutes or hours. The intensity rating here, which is based on this 0 to 6 scale here, which is taken from a German standard. So 0 being no odour through to 6 being extremely strong odour. The receptor sensitivity, again, as we said earlier, that in the main residential areas are classed as high receptor sensitivity. The effects reported by the clients at the time of visit, so how they responding to the odour, whether they've got to shut windows, they're showing health effects or effects in response to the odour, coming in from the garden, having not been able to use certain parts of the property in a reasonable way. So we'll make note of that. And then we'll also include officer comments on the odour. So we go along and provide that independent assessment based on our experience and training. Then it's also important then to be able to identify where the odour is coming from, if indeed we can. It's not always possible, especially in the case of transient odours. We can make a reasonable guess, but unless we can actually pinpoint it back to a source, it's very difficult. So we'll try and identify the source and how we've identified the source there. Obviously, the landfill site gates are open during the day, working day. If we had to have an odour report outside of office hours, it isn't something that we'd be able to get onto the site to do. But also we can go so far as the site boundary and form a reasonable view there if it were out of hours as to whether the site is contributing towards the odour, as well as the nature of the odour itself as well. Okay. So just in relation to complaints now, as you'll see, this is a graph of complaints that are made to the Borough Council through the contact centre, and this is analysis of data through our corporate information complaint system. So this has captured all complaints coming into the council, and as you can see from January 2019 right down here through to September this year, which is the most recent data that we've got for this purpose, that you can see that there does seem to be a seasonal trend in terms of complaints. Obviously, we've got a spike in complaints around August, September time here. So during that period, January 2019 through to September 2020, we've had 496 complaints to the council. Of those that have reported odour via the dedicated reporting form that we had set up, they were encouraged then to report and rate the odour on this 0 to 6 scale. And again, I've given a description here of what that 0 to 6 means. As you'll see here, we're tending to find most people are reporting, out of the 186 people who've reported odour and rated it, we've seen that people are reporting it from strong through to extremely strong odour. Extremely strong odour in our view would be something that would basically cause you to leave your property, or be so adverse that it would have some significant impact on how you use and enjoy your home or workplace. We've also looked at the data and done some high-level analysis, and what we can see from the complaint data is where people are affected here. Obviously, most people are telling us that they're affected at home, and or in a home or public place. Sometimes it's difficult to ascertain exactly where people are being affected. As I say, we are concerned with where people live or work in the main, so that will be the home or the workplace. What we can't deal with is anything in a public place, or when people are driving by. That falls outside the council's role and the powers that it's got. In terms of when people are affected, again, this is some high-level analysis, and it's not quite giving us the picture that you're probably expecting, but what we can see here is that most of the complaints are reporting issues indoors in the property or indoors and around the property. So these tend to be the garden and also in the home. I've got night here. That's just based on a description of when people have definitely reported complaints. But from looking at a description of the complaints in detail, what we can see is that from the how people are describing the complaints to us that they are identifying issues, particularly late evening and during the night. And what we think is happening there is that that's possibly driven by cooling weather conditions and obviously people being around and at home, particularly during the COVID restrictions and lockdown. So we are looking, as I say, to provide a resource to witness complaints, and currently set up to witness complaints during the working day. But we are looking to provide a resource to investigate complaints during the night as well. And that will be a time-limited resource, but to coincide with when we expect to see a rise in complaints. Out of the complaints that we've responded to during 2019 and 20, 31 complaints were responded to during that period when they are reported as happening now. So a lot of the complaints that we've had, in fact, the majority of complaints we've had during that period are after the event, reporting issues as people have managed to find their way to a computer or to the phone. So where we have been able to go out and respond to complaints last year and also this year during lockdown, we've gone to people's homes in the main and also workplaces. And during the day, certainly what we are finding is that the majority of those complaints, we're not finding any odour present at the time of visit. Typically what people are reporting is it's a transient odour, or it was a problem during the night, and they've just happened to smell it when they've been up and about. But by the time we've got there, usually within the space of an hour or so, the odour's disappeared. But we will have that discussion with people. We will stay on site and do the assessment at the time. And if there is anything that we attribute to the site or other sources, we will let the site know and also the Environment Agency know. And if there are other sources, we'll investigate those as well, typically agricultural sources, and that tends to be significant during the muck spreading season. Okay, so moving on towards air quality. The Borough Council has a statutory role in relation to local air quality management, and under legislation we are required to assess local air quality in relation to a range of statutory objectives and prescribed pollutants. So the most common one of those being nitrogen dioxide. You'll seen a lot in the press and in the media about nitrogen dioxide and vehicle emissions and traffic emissions. And then more recently, I know there's been some concern expressed about particulate matter, so that's why I focus more heavily on particulate matter. In terms of nitrogen dioxide, just to cover that one off, we do monitor around the borough for using diffusion tubes and also an air quality station that's located at Queen's Gardens. The diffusion tube locations are sited at principally heavy traffic locations around the town centre and across the borough, and we also have a number of we have around about 80 sites now where we assess nitrogen dioxide levels. And what we find there is there are areas of the borough, principally where there's heavy traffic routes around the town centre and Etruria Road, where we are currently exceeding UK nitrogen dioxide objectives for the annual mean. And that's based on the annual average level across the calendar year. Also, committee will be aware and the public will be aware that we're also subject to a ministerial direction on the A53, and that's in relation to nitrogen dioxide exceedance at footpath level. So action's being taken there. What we're not finding is any exceedances of nitrogen dioxide around the site or on roads leading to the site, principally generated around high traffic hotspots around the town centre. Moving on to particulate matter, members of the committee and also some of the community group representatives expressed concern about particulate matter. Obviously, this is a high area of high interest, given the amount of research that's been undertaken into particulate matter and health. Obviously, it does seem to be a regular feature in the media. So what we've done here, we've looked at monitoring data from the local network. We don't monitor this for ourselves at this moment in time, but we've looked at what's available locally and also nationally, and looked at how we're performing locally and nationally in relation to particulate matter. So particulate matter is expressed in microns. So PM10, which is anything up to 10 microns in size, and PM2.5, which is anything up to 2.5 microns in size. So very, very small particles. These are breathed in, find their way into the body, and can cause concern about health effects. Particularly the PM2.5 and less particles, there's emerging evidence there that they can persist in the body and lead to significant health effects. In terms of our statutory duty, we are governed currently by UK air quality objectives, and those are drawn from EU requirements. And what we'll see here in terms of particulate matter on the A50 at Mere, which is the very busy trunk road that passes through the area, we only had one exceedance there in the last year, in this current 2020 year. For legal purposes, we're allowed 35 exceedances of that limit, so we've slightly exceeded there, but only on one occasion out of the 35 allowed. And again, the next nearest site is Warrington. Again, one exceedance there in 2020 of 53 microns for PM10. So these are next to very busy major trunk roads. So that's typically where we'd find areas of high particulate matter. And then I've looked at the guidance and reports for London, just to give you a worst case example of an urban area. And in there for 2019, there was only one location in London which exceeded the annual allowance. I'll provide a link to that report to the committee if they wish to see that. So what we can infer from there is that based on living next to a very busy road in the centre of Stoke-on-Trent, the A50 at Mere, and also in Warrington, that we're not exceeding or expecting to see any exceedance of the PM10 UK objective, daily objective there. Also, in relation to the very fine particles, this PM2.5, so these very fine particles that pass into the bloodstream and lodge in the organs and brain. Again, we're not seeing any exceedances locally at Stoke, at Mere, or in Warrington. And again, in London, all sites have met the objective in 2020 and 2019. So, as we say, the objective is based on European guidance. There is some discussion at the moment about adopting World Health Guidance levels for statutory purposes, but that's a government decision. So in terms of what the council's role is about, we are governed by legal standards, and what we can quite confidently say in terms of legal standards is that in relation to particulate matter, PM10 up to 10 microns and PM2.5 up to 2.5 microns, that we are, based on that evidence there, more than likely not exceeding those levels locally around the landfill site or on any roads leading to the landfill site. Okay. And then in terms of our future work, we will have a statutory duty to respond to complaints, and we envisage that will stay in place up until the site closes. So anybody making a complaint, we have a legal duty to undertake a reasonable investigation and to, where we identify statutory nuisance, to act on that, as we said earlier. We're also providing a resource to witness complaints out of hours. That isn't something, as we say, we can sustain indefinitely, but I've got a dedicated team of officers who are willing to give up time to go out and respond to complaints during the night, including myself. So we give a commitment to do that, and that'll be 2 officers at any one time going out to witness complaints. We will take appropriate action in line with our legal requirements and statutory duties. Made that very clear, hopefully, through the presentation, what the obligations and duties are of the council. and that is something that we will do, and say we are fully accountable for everything that we do or don't do. We'll continue to assess future developments on and around the site and provide appropriate comments. So for any permit variations that might come forward, any developments that might happen on the site or around the site, and also in relation to the local plan development as well. So hopefully we will articulate our concerns and evidence for or against an application, or a permit application or a planning application. And then we'll continue to work with others. So that includes the community, stakeholders, elected members. We are out and about. We will answer questions. We like to think we're fully transparent and approachable. And really, we've got nothing to hide, and we are willing to work with anybody and everybody who has got a concern about the site where it's reasonable to do so. So through the elected members, through the Liaison Committee, through the regulators, and say we do quite often field comments and questions from members of the public as well as part of our investigatory role, and we'll do what we can reasonably do to assist and understanding of the site and its operations. So I think that's the final slide. So hopefully that's given the committee and those watching a good understanding of what environmental health does, the roles of the role of the Borough Council and its legal role in terms of investigation of odour complaints and issues relating to the landfill sites. I'm now happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Darren. I'll open this up to questions in a moment. If I may just ask one thing to start with, because this is something that I've encountered recently, and I think it might be nice to have an answer from either yourself or Nesta, and that's about the closure of the site. As you were saying, the amount that's allowed to be imported to the site has changed recently, and that's led, when I've been speaking to people, to all sorts of speculation about what this might mean in terms of the final closure of the site, in terms of the importation of waste.
Yes.
Can you give us a sort of reasonable date there? Because I'd like to close down, if possible, some speculation, because some of the figures I've heard have been very, very divergent.
Okay. In terms of the closure of the site for receipt of waste materials, that's governed through the planning permission for the site. That sets a date of sometime in 2026 for the actual closure of the site. In theory, given the permitted increase of waste inputs into the site, it could bring forward that closure date, so well before 2026, but there's no guarantee of that. So I think we have to take 2026 or a date in 2026 as the closure of the site for receipt of waste imports. From 2026 onwards up until 2042, then there's a restoration period that takes place. And again, that's governed through the planning permission for the site. And that's restoration to bring it back to some sort of community use. I believe it's restored, contoured, planted, and there's some beneficial community use as part of the final restoration plan. So I think a public open space, that sort of thing.
Thanks very much. No, that's very helpful, because as I say, I've heard a variety of dates bandied around. So that, in your opinion, the key date really remains 2026. Yes,
that's the date that's set in stone, if you like, through the planning permission. The Environment Agency permit grants a limit on the amount of waste that can be imported in any calendar year. And that permit will remain in place up until the permit is surrendered. So that permit will remain in place for probably 70 plus years. And it will look at things once the site closes, such as the gas infrastructure and the management of it. So it's making sure that the site isn't causing any problems to the local community, and that will be regulated and monitored by the Environment Agency.
Thanks very much. So now I've just asked my colleagues if they've any questions to ask of Darren or indeed Nesta, who I think is also willing to field questions. So, Councillor Reddish.
Thank you. I'm being a bit of a simpleton here because we've just established that the closure date is somewhere around 2026,
Yes.
and that was determined by planning conditions.
Yeah.
Now, if, as they've just won permission to put more stuff in the quarry.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean, my simple brain would say more stuff, the date comes forward from 2026, but you're saying not necessarily. So I don't quite understand that, because more stuff going in should mean shorter time.
It's, in theory,
or are they just putting more and more stuff in?
No, through the planning permission, and hopefully this will come from the county planning authority, that there is a maximum height that they can actually go to in terms of waste imports, and also the final restoration height. So that's all governed. So there is an actual upper limit for how much physical waste can go in there in terms of the height of the site. So once they reach that, then effectively that shuts the gates to further waste imports. So in theory, if they do utilise fully the increased tonnage, that will bring forward that date. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So
it won't mean there's any more waste going in, because obviously you've got this physical limit in terms of how high it can go and the profile of the site, which is set in the planning permission. So just basically means that they can take advantage of market forces and opportunities, and potentially finish the site sooner than. I
mean, one carrot I tend to dangle with residents is if they fill it up quicker, it's a short, sharp treatment and perhaps more odour.
Yeah.
But it won't be for so long.
Yeah. As they go through working the site, they work in what's called cells, so spirals around the site. So as they work in one area, they'll complete a cell, cap it, and then move on to another area, complete that cell, cap it, and then move around and up.
And one cell is almost at that stage of being capped, isn't it? Can't remember. I want to say 4, but it might not be.
Yeah, well, the area in front of the Cemetery Road, adjacent to the garden centre, I understand that's at the maximum height at this moment in time. That is to be capped in the very near future. So if you drive past there now, you'll see that they've done some significant engineering works. It's looking quite tidy in comparison to what it was before. Soiled, it's been levelled out. It's been contoured, and then they're working away from behind there to infill the rest of the site. So what I understand is likely to be happening in the very near future is that there'll be what we call permanent capping going on there, which is a permanent layer, and that will basically decrease the amount of surface area that gas can escape from. So there's gas infrastructure in there at the moment, and there will be gas infrastructure all through the site, including the working areas. But as they come to finish a cell, then it will be capped, and there'll be permanent infrastructure in place to limit the amount of gas that can escape. All the gas that's generated on site is required to be controlled, so it's not free to vent into the atmosphere. It is controlled through the gas infrastructure and the Environment Agency permit, and that's taken off into gas engines and used to generate electricity. And any excess gas that might occur that can't be handled by the gas engines is then burnt off through the flare. So that hopefully means that everything's in place, and we should hopefully see that emissions are controlled there.
I mean, the cell nearest persimmon seems quite tall now. Don't know whether that's nearly ready.
What I understand that's the area they're working in now, so there will be more activity in that area, and I think from what I understand today is that that's probably going to be more visible to there are
more complaints from that area at the moment.
Potentially, yes. Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
Councillor Jones, then Councillor Heason.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Darren. It was very, very informative. I noticed something that came to me when you were talking about the volume of complaints and very helpfully mapped that out across the year. And I think we'd agree that we do see that seasonality in terms of when we get high volumes of complaints. Certainly, as one of the local ward members, I see that. I just wondered if any work had been done to try and map that against what could be causing that seasonality of complaints. We talk a lot about certain weather patterns tend to produce a higher level of complaints due to odour. I just wonder if that's been explored any further, because in some ways that might help us. If we know that certain weather patterns are likely to lead to higher odour complaints, then that's something that can be worked through with the operator.
Yeah, that is something that we're looking to go into further detail for. Obviously, what I can't do is go into every complaint and look at the weather going back, but what I can say from my own experience working in the community, living in the community, is that this time of year we'll tend to see a spike in complaints. Obviously, the data that we presented there earlier on is showing that there's a significant spike around August, September time. Maybe some reasons for that in terms of weather conditions, what's happening on site, but we've not established that, not confirmed through those complaints that there's a nuisance there. It might be heightened public awareness. We know there's a very active social media campaign and concern, and obviously the scrutiny process itself has raised awareness there. So that might be a cause, but we're not dismissing complaints. We do accept the complaints as somebody's taking the time and effort to complain. It's just that we can't verify those complaints ourselves independently on occasions. We do our best when they're reported, but we'll do what we can reasonably do.
Can I follow up onto that a second? Thank you, Chair. In terms of your role or the environmental health's role in this, I think has been absolutely incredible, and hats off to you, because you've stepped in and performed exemplary.
Thank you.
How much interaction does the EA have with this? Because, for example, the EA themselves, as we're aware, should be investigating complaints, which they do, and is a large national organisation with huge volume of resources. Therefore, it wouldn't be beyond their ability to do such mapping exercise against weather patterns to determine whether there is any specific link between the two. I suppose the question is that something that we've explored with the EA? And if it isn't, is it something we could? And if no to that second point, are there any barriers to that?
It's certainly something I can take away with the EA. I'm sure there'll be research into landfills and gas generation and odour generation that's quite well published, and you will see under certain weather conditions that you will experience a greater amount of gas being released from a site, or odours being released under certain circumstances. I can have that discussion with the EA, and we can get something in writing from them if they're able to provide that analysis. Equally myself, I'm trying to get data from Keele University, real-time data from their Met station. So when we're responding to complaints, we've got that real-time local data as well. So it's localised towards the area. We do know that the site itself also has Met data. So they should be recording that as part and parcel of any complaint investigation as well. And indeed, they tell us on occasions that an odour can't possibly be from there because the wind's in the wrong direction. On occasions, that we have to take that as fact. But so they do their investigation. But certainly, I'll speak to the EA and see if there is any analysis that can be done there, and bring that back.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Eason.
Aye. As much as I'd like to be able to give residents the hope, if you like, that it would be coming to a completion sooner rather than later, in view of the fact that they can use a lot more tonnage, am I right in thinking that they don't have to work up to that limit?
That's correct, yes. Yeah, it is a commercial decision at the end of the day. They don't have to open the gates, they don't have to take any waste in. all they've got to do is finish the site by 2026. So obviously they're a commercial undertaking, so they'll look at what's available out there and take in what's available up to the limit of 500,000 tonnes, I think, from memory.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Okay.
I think Nesta wanted to say something. I need to just bring her in at this point, maybe.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to respond a little bit further in terms of Councillor Jones's question, just say in relation to the Environment Agency. Obviously, when they've done their periods of monitoring and when they reported to the committee, they had done the links between the monitoring that they'd undertaken and then the weather conditions at those times. So I think similarly to ourselves, they would have considered the weather conditions at the same time, but the actual outputs of that, no, we haven't, had from them. So like Darren says, we can raise that and see if there is any linkage. But I know certainly in the information they presented to this committee, that was one of the things that they did cover.
Thanks very much. Could I ask a couple of questions myself, please? One of them, Darren, and I agree with Councillor Jones that the mapping of complaints received by the council is very interesting, seeing where the frequency is. I noticed that you referred there to complaints made to the council. I know also that the Environment Agency has its own hotline.
Yes.
Have those two figures been blended in any way? In other words, can we get a total number of complaints made? Can we get the frequency of those put into your figures as well?
Something I'll ask for. Yes. What we do is certainly from earlier this year we started sharing complaints routinely with the Environment Agency. And we do encourage people when they're reporting to us to also report to the Environment Agency as well. So it may be a case that we've got double counting going on in some cases, but we'll certainly have a look and see if we can infer any trends, if not complaint numbers.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And another thing which pops up from time to time is when we look at this area, would it be your opinion that the source of these problems comes from Walley's Quarry? Can any other area in that district be identified as a potential source of odour nuisance, would you say?
There are other potential sources. As we said earlier on, agricultural sources, when there's much bedding going on. There's potentially some industrial sources locally. We've had people report odours which we couldn't really attribute ourselves to a landfill, but there may be some sort of industrial activity going on, such as paint spraying or that sort of thing. We're also in discussions with the Coal Authority about what might be coming from the mine workings locally. Obviously the mine workings locally are flooded in Silverdale and also Wolverhampton. We've had discussions with them about what they're monitoring for and where they're monitoring. What we do know is that they haven't identified any hydrogen sulfide odours, so this rotten eggs odour from these mine workings. So hopefully it'll be confirmed that they haven't identified anything that could potentially be attributed to the landfill type odour to mine workings, but we're waiting just for formal confirmation on that. We've also got a sewage pumping station in Silverdale on Silverdale Road, and we did make EA aware that their monitoring site initially was located next to a potential source itself, being the outlet of the sewage pumping station, and then also Poole Dam Marshes, which is potentially another significant source. But what I can confidently say is in terms of Poole Dam Marshes, we've not, through the time I've been working with the council, pre the landfill, identified any odour issues relating to that particular water body. That's not to say it can't be a potential source. It can be, obviously, by its very nature, it's a marsh. So the landfill potentially is a source, and I think that's been borne out by EA monitoring in the past, particularly the most recent monitoring that was undertaken reported this time last year. But in terms of nuisance, we're not able to say confidently at this stage that there's a statutory nuisance being caused by the landfill site. So we are mindful that odours are being experienced in the community, but being able to attribute and apportion those to a source is obviously something that we need to be able to do confidently, and also be able to say that that particular source is definitely causing a statutory nuisance for us to be able to act.
Okay, thanks. One final thing, if I may. The height of the site when it's finished. Presumably this stuff settles in some shape or form, but can you give us, vis-a-vis what we've got at the moment, I mean, what would you say when this process is finally finished? What is the height of that land likely to be, would you guess?
I can't give you a figure off the top of my head, but I do believe on the planning, County Council's planning website, there's what's called a restoration profile. So that gives a contour, basically a cross section of the landfill site. So together with heights of adjoining land. So that I'll dig that out and provide that to the committee, and that can go into the evidence there. Hopefully that will come from the County Council itself themselves, but I've got that to hand if needed. So I'll dig that out and provide that to you.
Thanks very much. Looking to my colleagues, have we got further questions from my colleagues? If I may, one last thing occurs to me, which is when you were talking about particulate matter, and I'd just like to raise this because concerns have been raised about this. And I sit on the relevant scrutiny committee that's been looking at air quality in general, so I'm familiar with the figures about the A50 and such like. What strikes me here is that is it not the case that you have to monitor this particulate stuff quite closely near the sites you think are going to be a problem? In other words, just because we haven't got a problem with the A50, yeah, can we be sure that we don't have a problem anywhere else?
That's why I included information on London in the report to yourselves this evening. Obviously, London being a very built-up area, lots and lots of construction activity going on in London, lots and lots of combustion activity, lots and lots of traffic. I think what we can infer from that, based on the current UK objectives, is that we shouldn't be identifying a problem locally. I'm not aware of many air quality management areas that have been declared for particulate matter. I think the ones that have been located near to steelworks or some major industrial activity rather than operations of this nature. But that's something we can look into if you wish, and provide a further response to committee.
No, I think what I'm concerned about is the concerns of people locally who might think that, well, the council's monitoring air quality at one end of the borough, but they're not monitoring it round here where it matters to us. Yeah. And it's just the science behind that, and whether it would be appropriate to monitor more closely or not. It may not be. I don't know. Is the answer.
What I can say is, if we are looking at particulate matter, PM10 and PM2.5, it's not something that we'd be able to provide residents with an individual monitor just to monitor what's at their home. These monitors are specialised bits of kit that need their own basically porta cabin or enclosure. So we'd be looking to cite one of those if we were to provide one or have funds for one. Where we think we'd be a worst case location, and then to provide that monitoring information on that basis.
Maybe if I can come in and also assist on that. Obviously, in terms of our local air quality management, then we go through a screening process to determine the sites and locations in the borough where we do have to look at these matters. And I think so that has been undertaken, and those reports are available on the website as well. I think the other thing that I would say that certainly in terms of PM 2.5, they tend to be such fine dusts and particles that they travel over extremely large distances, not always necessarily even from this country, they can come across the continent. So I think sometimes it's not, those levels can also be from wider sources as well, in relation to across the globe and across the continents, really. So they can be from certainly far farther afield than you know, the PM10 particles and the larger dust particles that people can potentially see and see on your, you know, windows, cars, or anything else around the area, really.
Thanks very much. So again, I'll just ask my colleagues if they've got any further questions to ask of Darren and Nesta at this point.
No, I haven't.
No, nothing from me.
In that case, I think, first of all, what we should do, of course, is thank Darren and Nesta for putting together that presentation. As has already been said, it was very thorough. I've certainly learned a deal from it this evening, and I hope that other people watching have also learned things from what's going on. This will be possibly the penultimate, maybe the final meeting of this form. The committee's work will continue to go on, or this working group's remit will continue to go on for a little bit longer yet. Well, we will produce some recommendations to the main scrutiny committee in due course. But I think we can now, with saying thanks to Darren and Nesta, draw this evening's proceedings to a close. So I'd like to thank everybody very much for watching this evening, and wish you a very pleasant rest of the evening. I won't say journey home because we are all at home, of course, but do have a very pleasant evening, and good evening.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.